What's up, my know-it-alls? It is that time again. We're talking about Picard. Man, this show gets good, and I am loving everything about it. I cannot wait to talk about it, so let's go ahead and get on into it. We're talking Picard, Season 3, Episode 4, No-Win Scenario. Man, okay, so when you get up in the mornings as early as I do to watch these things and to review them, you have a different lens on. And I mean that because it's like almost it's surreal. And the thing is, this show keeps hitting me constantly with wonderful things going on, but let's go ahead and get into it. So the episode starts with what I consider to be a really awesome moment of you get to see Picard, and he's clearly at 10 forward, or we assume, and some cadets come in and they're asking him questions, and they really want to ask him some stuff, and he's just and of course he starts talking to them, and it's pure. I love it. It's beautiful. It's wonderful Star Trek, in my opinion. And then the other thing is, as you watch the episode progress, they do these things. So this is a flashback moment. Then we come back to the present, and they do it a couple of different times throughout the episode. These beats that happen. So early on, and you're going to see why in a minute, I began to really realize, hang on, these are like these time skips, which you got to be careful when you say things like time skips in Star Trek, because then everyone thinks you're doing something with time travel, and that's not the case here. But these in storytelling, where you jump from something that happened in the past to the present, I began to notice early on, I said, these things are going to be relevant. These are going to be relevant for a reason. We're going somewhere with this. And don't get me wrong, it's a good story too. I mean, hearing the story he tells and the whole thing, and then talking about it's familiar stuff that we're familiar with. It's fun. It's fun to hear. So then you move to this really awesome moment. It isn't my crew, but it's my Star Trek. Riker's on the middle of the bridge, and he's workshopping. And that's really what this was. If you remember, back in the day, they would do that. It'd be like, oh, well, this whole thing's got to happen. Well, this thing and this, and these people talking, and it's this air of collaboration. And I think that's one of those. It's one of those tenets of Star Trek that I feel like really has cemented it, at least for me in my heart, as why I love the show, is because that's who I think we always should be, is very collaborative. So, but yeah, and so I really love that part. Because it's very classic, and it tells a story in and of itself. The story that they're telling is each of these people on the bridge is talented, knows their roles, and they immediately, in that one scene, in my eyes, elevated the crew. We had seen Shaw as the set dressing. Shaw's the guy. We're like, oh, Titan, Shaw, Hansen, LaForge. Sure, those are our key people. Now all of a sudden, I want to know the name of the lieutenant, the science officer, that Helms guy, that ops person. I want to know who these people are, because they seem like they're competent. And that's what I love about this, what this episode does. It brings Star Trek back, it gives Star Trek its competency back. And I realize I've kind of missed that. In all the action and shoot 'em up, and which I'm down for, we've kind of I didn't notice this until now. We're getting more of this back, and I'm like, oh my God. I feel the shift. Stylistically, cinematographically, we're going to keep all these new elements that I feel like have freshened it, but we're throwing back in some of what made, I don't know, I'm starting to feel like that one Rick and Morty part where he's like, I don't even know what that note means. And yeah, it's like, I don't know, because I'm about to say, it feels more like classic Star Trek, and I don't even know what that is anymore. So, but yeah, it feels comfortable. And that's what I feel like. It's funny, I don't think of it as nostalgia. I think of it as like it's wrapping this really nice warm blanket, which is, but they're doing it well. Is that like good nostalgia? I don't know. Anyway, so whatever. Comment below. Let me know your thoughts on good nostalgia versus like, what am I crazy? Anyway, I do love the fact that you see Seven is, she's very wary of changelings now. And she's very weird, like you can tell she's on her like game in terms of who she finds Foster's body, and she realizes, okay, this is So who do you turn to? What are you going to do? So she goes and she talks to Riker. And as she's talking to Riker, they agree. And again, so this it's funny. Terry Matalas and you guys over there, apparently, you guys are doing such great work in terms of marrying different elements and concepts. So now you have Seven and you have Riker and they're talking, and Riker's like, look, we got a limited amount of time here. If there's a saboteur, he's like, I'm not telling you, what I'm saying is, just keep it off the books. What he's saying. And she's like, okay. And you're like, okay, yeah. And so now they're working together. Who does Seven go to? Seven goes to visit Shaw. I love this whole episode. I'm going to tell you right now, the MVP of this episode for me is going to be Shaw when this is all said and done. Okay? And he's his snarky self. He's this and that. But she's very real with him. And you know why she goes? Because she's a good officer. Because she knows, despite the foibles and nonsense and whatever else, one, that's what you should do. But also, who knows the ship better than literally the guy who was a former chief engineer who was part of the people who did the refit? Okay? And I'm just saying, it's so she's so on point. It's ridiculous. And she's also establishing key elements to her character that, God, in a spin-off show, I want the Titan Shaw Seven show. I want that show so bad. Anyway, so they agree to work together, and so they're gonna. And they. So then you cut to this really touching moment, but it's very telling at the same time, which is Riker wants to say something. He wants to send a message home, a message in a bottle. If the ship's going to collapse and break apart and whatever else, he wants to at the very least have an opportunity to leave kind of maybe a message behind, and he can't. He can't. He keeps first he starts out, it sounds very formal, then he tries to get personal, and it's just he can't really make the words connect, and so he ends up leaving it alone. And it's like, you're like, oh, golly, dude, really? Come on, man. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me flash real quick. As soon as Riker knew that the ship he believed there's no hope. After he finished his meeting with the round table with the bridge crew, he goes straight to Picard, and they have this awkward moment where maybe it's conciliatory because obviously they left off last episode of bad whatever, and so they have this encounter, and right in the middle of the encounter, he says, "Look, you have very limited time. Go spend it trying to connect with your son." And Picard realizes he's got to do that, so he goes. Now, looping back, because I had forgotten that element, I called it, or someone in the comments, we were talking in one of the things I was trying to remember. Yeah, I think one of the comment section of the last episode or whatever. It looked like they were going to be in 10 forward of some sort in one of the images. And so, and we were speculating whether or not it was a flash forward, a flashback, or whatever else. And finally, someone had said the holodeck. So sure enough, it's the holodeck. So we get to see the holodeck, how it's functioning and looking into. By the way, still looking pretty darn good. Also get to see a redress of the same set. Get to save a little bit of cost of production because you already have the 10 forward set. Because I think they actually made it an experience in San Diego, San Francisco, somewhere. Anyway. So you get to see them walk in, and sure enough, they begin to kind of have this conversation, and they have a drink. It's funny, Picard tries to be all wine, and he's like, nah, and then it ends up being whiskey or whatever else. Anyways, Jack is of a mind that he tells him, he's like, look, if you think this is something I need, he's like, I don't. And then that's when Picard's like, but I think I do. And I was like, okay, we're going somewhere. Okay, cool. Because now I feel like when you pull this big of an emotional string, a son, at this late in this guy's life, you got to find reasons and things, and you got to make it make sense. And I feel like they've done that. I'm sold on the reasoning. It was rocky in the beginning for me. Not that my opinion solely matters, but I'm sold now, and I'm able to kind of go with you on that story. So, Shaw. Oh my God, Shaw with the confirmation that cannabis exists, and I can tell you right now that is one of my favorite admissions from them. He's like, not. I assume you're not. They're talking about pot and some a different kind of in a different context. Anyways, it's hilarious. But then because they're talking about how you know someone's a changeling or not or whatever else. And then he's like, well, you know, you can, and he starts paying all these compliments. And she goes, he's like, if you weren't such a colossal jerk. And he's like, because that's what a changeling would say. Right. You know, because clearly he doesn't think those things. But does he? Because I really feel like I feel like it's a very telling moment. And I think that you can tell his desire to work with her and do this stuff comes from a place of respect. She may not like the way she's been treated, but she respects who he is as an officer. And at the end of the day, he will do the right things that's when necessary in the whole bit. It's okay? And I believe the same. I believe he would not work with her if he didn't have some level of respect for her. And the fact is, especially when she's telling him, oh yeah, it's the whole, you'll see, it's good. Anyway. All right. When Seven starts searching, she's searching around people's because she's looking for because Shaw gives her the idea about the residue. He says, "Listen, you want the fastest way to find this thing? You got to get a good solid residue scan on one of its buckets, and then the ship's sensor can track it down." While she's on this hunt, she gets attacked. Oh yeah, so again, this is all happening in the span of whatever little time the ship has before it's going to explode. They're packing so much story, and I gotta tell you, it doesn't feel rushed. At least it didn't to me. We finally go back to Vadic. Vadic gets ordered to go in because she's also a changeling. She cuts her hand off and apparently she somehow has, they have Great Link Mobile. I don't know. It's how they explain it, because it's sort of a thing. Once she puts her parts in there, it becomes a face and it talks in this weird kind of. It looked like it was going to be one of the Artron or Metatron people or whatever, the original series with the big heads, and I was going to be like, oh my god, mic drop, who knew? Can you imagine? Just something. It's done. I'm done. I'm sorry. I'm being ridiculous. But so Vadic has to go in. She's not going to have any more portal technology because there's too many gravimetric whatever the heck. So they have to actually literally disengage the system from their ship. So they literally, the little clamps come off, the thing floats off, and they go in. So they're going to go after him now. And then we get this really interesting moment where Picard's telling Jack a story. It's a shuttle story, whatever it has to do with, and it's an allegory that'll come in handy later. And Shaw walks in, and Shaw is angry. And we get so much character development from Shaw. It's so meaty. Like a sandwich. I want to be like, it's so good. Anyway, he explains. He says, he's like, oh, that story, this and that. And he explains an encounter he had, his secret origin story, villain origin story with Picard. He's a survivor from Wolf 359, Battle of Wolf 359. He explains exactly where he was at, who he was and whatnot. And he was an engineer at the time, and he's just a grease monkey and this and just some, he said, you find out he's from Chicago, which I'm like, that explains so. My wife's from Chicago. Mrs. Know-It-All's from Chicago. Trust me, it explains so much. And that's why I realized I love this guy. It was a very traumatic story, and you see a different side of Picard, or how Picard is seen, at least for his son, for Jack. So Jack now has to see so Picard said, no, it's cool, don't, I'm good. And he walks out. Because at the end of the day, Picard realizes he must own. And it's funny, they kind of lampshade, but we've always kind of said, how in the world does someone do and is part of to that level of destruction, like having been taken and kidnapped and turned into Locutus and the whole bit, and still get command back? So he's not making arguments that aren't valid. And you sit here and you go, man, just how much has he had to deal with? And then everything, it just all comes into focus. And you sit here and you go, dude, give Todd Stashwick all the everythings, man. I love that guy. He is my new hero. Oh my goodness. Anyways, so yeah, no, dude, I want this. I want him in other things, man. I want these. Thank you, by the way, for giving us such rich characters that I believe will fuel further stories and things. We'll get comics. If nothing else, give me a comic book series with the whole Captain Shaw crew, Titan crew. Let's go, man. That would be so amazing. Because again, I'd love to see those stories, and I feel like there's so much character there that they could easily work with. All right, so moving on. We then enter a whole new phase of this thing, and again, they've packed so much into this show. I feel like I'm going long, but there's this amazing moment. Beverly's talking to Picard, and Jack is there, and they're exchanging ideas, and all of a sudden, you just start seeing they're going on supposition. She walks in, she says, look, my conclusion's based on this. It's all the scientific, I tested it, I've been measuring, we see this whole thing, it's the repeated result, this is the logical conclusion, this is what's happening. She scienced the problem to identify it, and then they get together and they figure. I'm like, oh my god, this is my Star Trek. They're like just coming up with stuff, because that was literally how it used to be. Now, and obviously some people will say, well, it was literally how science fiction was written back then. No, but I mean, it was the idea was sometimes you reach the edge of space, the edge of knowledge, and you just have to go with your gut. And that's what these people are trained to do. That's what makes them role models. That's what made me want to be a member of Starfleet for so long. That's what really locked me into this series, was realizing all these people were the best of the best, not because necessarily they were the best, but because they had striven to be, and this whole organization lifted. It was amazing. You get my idea. You see what I'm saying? Sorry, I don't mean to preach, but this was really. I feel so many things about this show. When Riker comes around, it is such a pure moment, because you still see angry, belligerent Riker who's just really, what are you talking about? Stop being crazy. And then I feel like it clicks. I don't know one of them says it, something along the lines of, why don't we go out doing the thing that we always do best, which is what? It's exploring. It's boldly going. It's finding new life. It's finding new ways. It's understanding. It's really pushing the boundaries. This felt so the pure essence of Star Trek to me that I've loved it. I'm eating it up, man. I'm just eating the whole thing up. It's crazy. And he turns around, and suddenly he has a thought and a thing, and you're like, oh. It's great, because then you're like, Riker, you're back, bro. And then you see Riker he says, hey man, if we're gonna do this, you're the guy who knows how to, you know how to fly us through this craziness, Jean-Luc. You have the con. And you see Picard for the first time in all these series, genuinely. Because I know there's been moments, and they've all kind of mirrored this, but this is on a Federation ship, man. This is the closest thing to being on the bridge again of the Enterprise or wherever. And it's literally them, and I love it. And he sits down, and he gives some orders, and he's doing his thing, and you're like, God. And you get a moment, too, where a couple of moments, they look over to Riker. Riker's like, yeah, man, you still got it. Like, you can tell. It's great. Again, very, very pure moments of true joy. And I don't see them as nostalgia as much as this is, again, that warm feeling of comfort. I feel comfortable here. Comfortable in a way that makes me want to keep watching the show. And that's something to notice and think about. So, anyways, yeah, man. The thing works. They have the big burst of energy that Beverly's been monitoring. What we find out is that this entire nebula is giving birth to something, and sure enough, when the final energy blows out, the ship absorbs the power and goes forward. It's able to get back into warp, and they move forward. They're in an ocean of space squids. Space jelly, they're not jellyfish, they're like space squids, and it's beautiful. And you have this wonderful moment where they reflect on the fact that this is what we'd like. This is seek out new life, man. Here it is, And then Riker's like, hey, can we boldly get the hell out of here, please? And I'm like, right on, dude. No, just go. You're good. And they make it out, and it's great. And you get past this major point in the storyline, which I'm interested to see where the series goes from here. Vadix got an hour of repairs behind her, so they're long got him, and they're leaving them behind. And so what comes next? And it's this, we've connected with Shaw. We've connected with all these characters. I really would love to see this continue, man. Let's see where this mission goes next. So, yeah. So, all right. So what's the know-it-all index for this episode? For me, this episode I think it's solid, man. I'm going to give it a solid, this was for me a solid 9. It had all the working parts I needed. I think maybe you needed just one or two. If you gave me a cameo, maybe it would have knocked it up into the 9.5 or 10. Who knows? Just saying. Anyways, no, but we'll look forward next week. Hey, look, comment below. Let me know what you guys thought. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again next week. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.